Nola, and welcome to what the Chinese call their New Year. It is Sunday the 22nd of January, and I'm standing in the most beautiful park where there's a wildlife sanctuary. There's a lake behind me. As you can hear, there are beautiful birds in the background. This is one of the very pretty places on the Gold Coast where people can stop and they can observe the wildlife. They can take in the cool breezes and they can just enjoy being in nature without any need to rush. We can just relax and enjoy what we have around us. And I wanted to bring you here for a couple of reasons. To talk about mediocrity and to talk about accountability. Over the last week or so, I've come to some realizations why certain clients engage personnel who are not competent, to put it simply. And what it boils down to is that if you have people working for you and they do a really good job and you're not as confident in your skills, then what the risk to you is that those people will actually show up your skills and the fact that you don't have a level of competence. So that brings us to the question of mediocrity and whether people actually are happy to be average, to be mediocre, whereas they could present their very best selves every day. In No Boxing Allowed, I talk a lot about people making choices and that motivation is the strongest when it comes from within. But the other thing is that if people create what's called a too hard basket, then they'll have the opportunity to put stuff in that basket and say, oh, that's a bit hard today, I won't do that. The second that you create a basket that's for the too hard stuff, then firstly you're not challenging yourself, you're not being your best possible self, you're not realizing your greatest potential, and you're also copping out. Before I came to this park, I went to get, because it's quite a hot day today on the Gold Coast, and I went to get a cool drink from a local supermarket, and I also had to stop at a shopping centre. And when I pulled my car up to that shopping centre space, there were some shopping trolleys that people had left. Now, certain places in Australia, you have to put a dollar coin, a gold coin, in the trolley, sort of like a release clip. And if you don't put your dollar coin in, then you don't get to use a trolley. And what that does is it encourages people to return trolleys. But as I was moving a trolley that was parked in the middle of the spot where I was going to put my car, this fellow was on the right hand side and he pulled up, and he was lucky. He had a bull bar on the front of his four-wheel drive, and there was still a trolley that was right near the front of his car, and as he got out of the car I said, look, I'll move it for you. I said, I'm really sick to death of this, it's just people being lazy. And he made the comment, yes, he said, it's all too hard. Now, if we continue down this path of accepting mediocrity and saying, it's a bit hard today, I won't do it today, or finding excuses why things can't happen instead of saying, I can make this happen, I can do this, and being strongly self-motivated to bring the best outcome. If we don't go down that path, then what we're going to end up with is a little bit like the Back to the Future movie, the second one I think it is, where Biff, the character Biff, gets a hold of the book that allows him to place bets on what he knows will be the winning team or the winning race car entry or whatever. And he has this sports almanac that lasts for decades, and he makes himself a millionaire/billionaire out of betting on what is a known surety to win. And what that movie highlighted was that if people make the wrong choices and they choose to be deceptive, they choose to lie, to cheat, to be lazy, to have an attitude of it's all about me, it's everything that I want and it doesn't matter what other people miss out on. If we go down that path and let's say we all made that choice to be dishonest, to bet on things, to make sure that we were the ones ourselves that won everything, that we did the least possible, that we don't make an effort when it comes to anything in life, we just sit back, we wait for it all to come, then what we end up with is anarchy. We end up with societies where there is no accountability. We end up with so much dysfunction and so much attitudinal shift to the negative that we can't get back on track. And I can see, just in Australia alone, where we're headed down that trajectory. Queensland, where I call home here in Australia, Queensland is a very large state. It's at the top. It's the pointy one at the top of Australia. And look, we do have a significant issue with youth-related crime, a blatant disregard for safety, well-being and everything else. And there is nothing in the justice system that actually appropriately punishes people for doing the wrong thing. But there are a couple of root causes to this. Firstly is the education system that doesn't produce the right quality people who have competency, who have the ability to be discerning, who know how to risk manage, who actually are courteous to one another, who create positive relationships. Our education system does not produce those people. We pump children out of the system. We know now that their literacy and numeracy is well below what it was, and certainly well below other countries. And we're on that path where we're accepting mediocrity. Now, the other side of it, with regard to youth crime, as one example of attitudinal shift, we've got governments that aren't prepared, that aren't courageous enough to actually impose the penalties associated with law. We have a robust constitution in Australia. We have laws that are very similar to other civilised countries, and yet for some reason our judicial system doesn't want to punish people and nip it in the bud, so to speak, early on. And I was volunteering this morning, and hence why my clothes are somewhat casual. I was helping out a local sailing club, and I was saying to one of the ladies that, if we don't start changing the trajectory that we're on, and we don't start expecting people and holding people accountable for their results from when they go to school, both the teachers and the students, to when they're in the workplace, to when they're actually running businesses and building families of their own and contributing to communities instead of taking from communities. If we don't start holding people accountable at every level, we are going to end up in an awful lot of trouble, and we won't be able to reverse that trend. And the movie with Biff and the society that he creates, where it's lawless and it's all about money and it's all about power and greed. That's what happens when you don't hold people accountable, and when you don't have structure and you don't have rules and you don't have boundaries. When children are little, good parents will set boundaries for their kids, and they will not waver from those boundaries until they know that a child is mature enough to be able to make certain decisions for themselves. But what we're also seeing now is a lack of accountability by parents. They're saying, I'll send my kids to school. It's the school's job to sort that out. It's the school's job to teach them right from wrong. So parents are copping out. On the flip side, the students that come to school, when they misbehave, The teachers have the attitude, well, it's not my job to teach them right from wrong. That should come from their parents. We all know that parenting is a tough job. In a perfect world, we would not allow people to have children unless they pass some kind of aptitude and morality test. That would be nirvana if we actually had people who were assessed as competent and able and moral enough and with enough ethics and honesty to be able to raise their children to be good citizens locally and globally. But when we know that that's not likely to happen, as much as I personally would love to see that happen, we have to have a system that supports good behaviour, that doesn't reward bad behaviour, that doesn't scapegoat bad behaviour, that doesn't label mediocrity as okay. 80% isn't good enough. If you don't target the best, you will never get to even close to the best. And that brings me to the last point that I want to make today, and that's about safety. Now, a few nights ago I was walking. It was after I'd logged off from my client site and I'd finished my company work, and I took myself for a walk by the water, and there was a young lad about maybe 14, 15 years old, and he was on an electric scooter. He was riding that scooter at about 40 miles an hour, 60 odd kilometers an hour, and really, really fast. He was exceeding the speed limit in the area anyway. He was on the wrong side of the road, so he was riding against the oncoming traffic outside of where the cars were parked. So highly dangerous. Now in Australia, if a driver comes along, doesn't see that child on the scooter and hits the child and kills the child, the driver of the car goes to jail. And personally, I think that is just absolutely wrong. What I believe we need to start doing is to look at each situation on its merits and actually hold the person who is accountable responsible, and charge that person and penalise that person, not the car driver who's on the road, who's doing the right thing. Here in Queensland and not far from here, there was an awful head-on crash involving two Mercedes-Benz. One of the drivers, the guilty driver, was on the wrong side of the road evading police, slammed the car into a family of three. That car, though robustly built and a very good car from a safety perspective, burst into flames. And the system may or may not punish that driver appropriately. I would hope so. I would hope that driver never has the opportunity to get behind a wheel, though granted the driver was driving unlicensed. So we have a system that's not really stopping people from doing the wrong thing. We don't have enough of a penalty and enough of a punishment to deter bad behaviour, and from a prevention perspective, we don't have an education system that encourages good behaviour and rewards good behaviour. If you ask a psychologist what motivates people, most will say negative or punishment for a negative behaviour. However, positive reinforcement of positive behaviour is by far the greatest motivator for people. Children are not born negative thinkers. They learn how to be a negative thinker. They learn it from their surroundings, from their parents. They learn it from experience where they cannot resolve the issues that they've faced. And usually people with a lower level of resilience will end up perpetually negative at some point in their lives until they have a wake-up call. Now, when it comes to people's safety, there is no room for injury tolerance. If we don't bring in a zero injury and therefore zero death tolerance right across the board, and globally, then we're not going to look after the greatest, most intelligent asset that the world has. Human beings are by far the greatest asset to either make or break. So if we allow people to develop positively to the best of their ability, they will only do good. They will make sure that areas like this are held and we keep them and we don't destroy them. They will make sure that we don't overly pollute the earth, that we arrest the climate change and the warming of the planet that is obvious to us all now, and the various implications for things like coral reefs, for forests, for glaciers, for the Arctic Circle, the Antarctic Circle. We've got major issues that we're facing everywhere. And if we don't keep reinforcing the same positive message and helping people to bring about positive change, then we're going down a path that we will not be able to reverse. So I encourage you at every level and in every context to get people to give their best. Don't accept mediocrity. Reward positive behaviour. Focus on prevention. Focus on zero injury tolerance. Focus on accountability. Hold people to account for what they say and what they do, and also what they don't say and don't do when they should have. I'll see you again in February. I wish you a wonderful month and I look forward to chatting with you again. I'll put some links and information about my books which reinforce these messages